Hello and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Nicole Prohaska. I am a test consultant at Schufried, and for the next approximately 15 to 20 minutes, I would like to tell you a bit about your options for pre-selecting professional drivers, especially abroad. First, in general, and afterwards, how you can use our mobile safety screening SAFESC to do so. As always, you can ask questions by typing them into the question boxes of the GoToWebinar tool, and I will collect them and address them at the end of the webinar. But first, let's look at the current personal situation that we are currently facing in the road transport industry. And let's start with some positive news. Because according to Eurostat, road freight transport is by far the most important mode of transport in the EU, with a share of approximately 75%. Also, automation is not seen as a threat to professional drivers. For example, the former IRU president, Christian Labronte, said that yes, there will be more driver assistance systems in trucks, but this will only lead to drivers' tasks changing and not necessarily how many professional drivers we actually need. Private transportation will also decrease, which means more need for public transportation and therefore more bus drivers, for example. But there are also some bad news, because at the same time, we are already facing enormous staff shortages, which have already become a threat to supply security. EU-wide, every fifth position is not filled, and this trend will likely continue. And the staff shortage in the UK, for example, is growing by 50 drivers a day, and Poland will lack 200,000 drivers until 2022. Most of the time, this personal shortage comes from retirements and a lack of young talent. On average, professional drivers in the EU are already 50 years old. The EU is already responding to this problem by, among other things, harmonizing and modernizing laws across the EU with regulations on the recruitment and training of personnel. In the future, the qualifications of personal drivers will be stored electronically so that they can be easily accessed across national borders, making recruitment abroad very easy. Also, the minimum age of truck drivers is being discussed, which could give younger target groups, such as teenagers, the chance to apply in the future, even though they don't necessarily now have a driver's license. Overall, this presents us with three major challenges. On the one hand, we will likely have to deal in the future with younger target groups, and they often don't have a car driver's license, but they are generally interested in the job and are capable of performing. So it would be good if we could support such young talents in getting their driver's license, which will of course result in costs for our company, but also enables us to hire employees at a very early stage and get the most out of them if they stay long enough with the company. The second challenge is that due to the easing of regulations, it's easier to recruit abroad, which frees up even more personal potential. At the same time, assessing whether someone is actually fit for the job is very difficult if this person is far away and cannot easily travel on site for a work sample or an interview. Because after all, we are dealing with safety critical positions and naturally don't want to cause any accidents and don't want to hire just anyone just to fill the vacancies. This means that despite a shortage of personnel, we have to make sure that the people we eventually hire can drive safely and that the training and education that we invest in them is worthwhile. Many corporations tackle these challenges with a combination of a CV screening, online interview, and on-site testing, currently under strict conditions because of the COVID-19 crisis. But all of these steps are quite labor-intensive and require a lot of HR personnel. To solve this problem of a lot of resources being used here, we can add a few simple tools to our process, namely an online screening before the costly interviews and on-site testing, and periodic testing to ensure that hired employees remain effective over time. And yeah, these are exactly the 2 points that we will be discussing in detail today. Let's start first with the online screening. An online screening is generally a very cost-effective, cost-efficient method for identifying unsuitable applicants early in the recruiting process. Let's assume we have a large number of applicants. Without an online screening, we would need to do an interview or an on-site testing with almost all of them. Even if we do a CV analysis before the interview and exclude some of the applicants, recruiters usually still end up with large numbers of people that fit the broad demographic or educational criteria for a certain job position. What happens is that we test and interview a lot of people which are unsuitable, but only find out that they are unsuitable after these costly face-to-face steps. And only then we end up with the suitable applicants and later on employees. This, of course, results in unnecessary costs, not only for the recruiter, but sometimes even for the applicants who need to travel to the testing site, for example. However, with an online screening, we can identify most of these unsuited applicants before we conduct the cost-intensive interviews and on-site tests. This results in an overall lower number of interviews and on-site tests without compromising on the number of quality, on the number or the quality of the selected applicants at the end of the process. However, for this to work, we need to test those abilities and personality traits that are actually relevant to the safety critical roles. Unfortunately, there are no uniform standards in Europe, but even though legislation across the world kind of reads differently, there are many abilities that occur consistently, which is concentration, orientation, attention, reaction ability, and stress tolerance. The reason why legislative texts, different as they may be, often are based on kind of the same concept is because they heavily rely on similar or even oftentimes the same theoretical scientific models. In the case of professional drivers, we mostly work with the GDE Matrix, which is the Goals for Driver Education, which is a hierarchical model with 4 levels. The bottom level, level 1, the broadest one, represents the most basic level and is essentially about mastering the vehicle. Here, the focus is predominantly on basic performance characteristics such as concentration or responsiveness. Level 2 is the more practical skills in various, often very hectic traffic situations like intersections. And this level requires more complex abilities like gaining an overview and resilience or stress tolerance. Level 3 involves the critical decision making during and before the journey, for example, when planning routes. This is more about understanding and analyzing different traffic situations than it is about maneuvering the vehicle. And this is why this level primarily requires more complex abilities such as logical reasoning. And the top level deals with the individual driver characteristics that have an influence on safe driving behavior and thus on the frequency of accidents, which is, for example, if you are risk avoidant or if you are more prone to taking risks. This model takes a broader view and expands the legal texts. These additional dimensions are also the ones that can best predict whether a person can be trained and educated successfully, regardless of if they are a professional driver or a white-collar worker, because it's very broad abilities, which makes them especially important when we consider investing resources in younger drivers and support them in getting their driver's license. A few of those requirements that you can see here can be tested online very well, which is concentration, logical reasoning, and the personality factors. And you can do this with our safety screening SAFESC. SAFESC consists of 3 different tests. That is the inventory for testing cognitive abilities, INT, the attention and concentration test, TACO, and optionally the Big 5 structure inventory, BFSI. INT is a matrices test to measure logical reasoning. This test involves finding the one figure that does not follow the rules of the other figures, so a basic matrices test. Int is adaptive, which means that everyone gets different tasks according to their ability levels, and the tasks are pulled from a very large pool of tasks. The test is also time limited, and both together make it very difficult to cheat, even though they are administered online without supervision. In TACO, on the other hand, applicants need to find and select certain figures in a very short amount of time, thus measuring basic concentration. In addition to these cognitive abilities, the short questionnaire BFSI can also be used to assess relevant personality traits. Applicants can complete all of these tests in around 25 minutes, and all they need is a stable internet connection and any normal internet browser. Otherwise, SAFESC can be performed regardless of the device, browser, or location, making recruiting abroad very easy. For recruiters, the online screening as well only requires a few clicks. Our test platform, the Vienna test system, just requires recruiters to enter the person data, click on the invite button, and then the link is sent out automatically to the applicants. After the test was completed, the test results are automatically scored and are directly available in the Vienna test system. This is how the evaluation looks like. It's very easily understandable, it's evidence-based, and it consists of a few different elements. On the top, you have a weighted overall score, which indicates the fit between an applicant and a job profile. And the weight of the respective test results, so how much a certain test result adds to the fit score, is based on empirical studies. Besides that, you have a star rating, which allows you to easily categorize your candidates. For example, you could only invite those with 2 stars or more, or only those with 3 stars. And for more details, you have individual test results that are printed below. Based on the fit score, you could also, or the SAFESC index, you could also rank applicants automatically and not just invite all the applicants with 3 stars, but maybe the 50 bests that you have. Regardless of the approach, only applicants with good enough test results proceed in the recruitment process, which allows you to filter out unsuitable applicants very early. But you can also see that we still have some abilities that we need to cover, and we need to cover them usually on site because these are psychomotor abilities which require special input devices in order to accurately measure, for example, reaction ability down to the millisecond, accurate down to the millisecond. Each of these remaining abilities can be tested with a separate tests. We have already an existing pre-configured test set which combines all of these different tests. These are just a few examples into an easy to use test battery, which can be also administered with just a few clicks. This is called AsRoad, the Safety Assessment Road. Additionally, you can also test abilities that were already tested in the online screening in a shorter form on site under supervision to validate whether the test results achieved by an applicant in the unsupervised online screening actually hold true. After the testing similar to SAFESC, AsRoad offers an automatic, understandable, and science-based evaluation. And additionally, you can also have an optional results report, which lets you get the most out of every test result. This report includes a verbal interpretation of the test results in the context of a professional driver. And it also includes an interview guideline with questions that are based on the test results to validate good test results and to see if there are any compensation strategies for bad test results or not so good test results. So with these simple steps, we have found all our suitable applicants to fill our vacancies. However, people change over time, especially regarding their abilities. So we now have hired good employees, but what in 20 or 30 years? This is exactly where periodic testing comes into play. After an employee was hired, their employer invests a lot in them, for example, with trainings and of course with increasing salary. This means that an employee should stay with the company as long as possible to give their employer the highest possible return on investment. At the same time, an employee needs many skills for their work as a professional driver, and these abilities can decline with age. For example, psychomotor skills such as reaction time and eye-hand coordination are particularly affected by such age-related declines. So the longer an employee stays with the company, the higher the risk that their skills will decline too much to continue for them to work safely. At first glance, these two aspects seem to be in tension, but they don't have to be. This is where periodic testing comes into play. We can, for example, continuously review the performance of an employee by regularly administering psychometric tests, for example, every 2 years, every 5 years. If the test results remain within the normal range, then the employee can continue to work as usual and everything is fine. If, on the other hand, deficits become apparent, measures can be taken immediately. This doesn't mean firing an employee, of course. If beginning deficits are noticed at a very early stage, the relevant skills can be trained, for example, with cognitive training. Cognitive training was, of course, originally intended for cognitively impaired patients, but studies consistently show that it also works very well on healthy people. Alternatively, if employees have deficits that pose an actual safety risk and are just too too much, these employees also don't need to be fired, but could be transferred to other positions, for example, training managers, which not only ensures the safety within the company, but also makes maximum use of the existing knowledge and multiplies it internally. The good thing about periodic testing is that there are months or even years between the periodic test sessions. So the same tests as for the selection can be used for this purpose. So with just these two additional steps, we now have a very well-rounded, efficient personnel process from the application to the retirement, which allows us to get the most out of every application and every professional drivers. And as our personal process comes to an end, it also simultaneously brings our webinar for today to a close. Thank you very much for your attention and have a pleasant day.